Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows, you're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbor's best friend's login for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all that entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings you live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part? There's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package.
What is crack-a-lackin', Hardwood Knocks listeners? I am Damp Valley, coming at you without my fantabulous co-host, Adam Brommel. I am, however, pleased and excited, as always, to keep our season look-ahead train rolling. We have the Houston Rockets up next, so I brought on my good friend, Salman Ali. He covers the NBA and the Houston Rockets for Clutch Points. He also hosts the Red Nation Hoops podcast for Blue Wire Podcast. We are also with the Blue Wire Network. Fantastic people over there. Follow Salman on Twitter at Salman Ali NBA. That's at SalmanAli NBA. We get into all things Rockets. Wanted to do a special quick note here. I'm going to be doing a lot of pre-recorded intros moving forward. We asked that we will still be publishing a lot of national content during this time, the lead up to the season. We'll be attaching them to some team previews in front of it. We do ask, though, look, if you're fans of the general NBA, download these podcasts anyway. Just if this is your first time listening to us because you saw us from Salman or you're a Rockets fan, give us a chance. Look at our national coverage, rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. This time of year is weird because a lot of people don't necessarily like to chopper in and talk about specific teams. I think it's very useful to try and do a deep dive into as many teams as possible. We are basically going to be going 7 days a week now through the start of the season if the schedule works out as planned. So we appreciate everyone who goes on these journeys with us. I love talking to people who cover specific teams, have intimate knowledge of those squads as we get ready for the start of the year. I think it's a lot of fun and an instructive and informative exercise. I will not waste any more of your time, though, other than to say, remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com, search Hardwood Knocks, will pop up. Follow us on Twitter at Hardwood Knocks. And again, if this is your first time listening, please, pretty please, with trigger on top, subscribe to us, download all our episodes. That goes for longtime listeners too. Download all our episodes. Help us continue to juice those numbers. But let's talk some Houston Rockets now with Salman Ali from the Red Nation Hoops podcast. And welcome back to the Hardwood Knocks podcast. It felt weird not recording with you 8 times over the offseason like we did last year when the Russell Westbrook, James Harden stuff was happening. But there is still stuff happening in Houston Rockets land to the point that there's a chance, which will be on brand for us, that this podcast gets dated after it goes up, because maybe the Rockets get rid of John Wall. Maybe they don't. They've been mentioned tangentially in the Ben Simmons sweepstakes. I think every team at this point has been mentioned in the Ben Simmons sweepstakes. First and foremost, though, how the hell are you?
I'm doing all right. The weather's pretty good in Houston. No more tropical storms for the time being. You never know with that stuff. It can form at any time, but I think I'm doing all right for right
now. The Rockets, though, they've undergone kind of a facelift over the past year-ish. Really, to get us started before we get into the nuts and bolts of everything, what were just your impressions, takeaways from what they've done this offseason? I guess I should put the asterisk of so far. Any prevailing themes or any moves that surprised you that you liked, and anything along those lines?
Well, it's pretty clear that they're really leaning into the youth movement. Like as an indicator, like before the offseason, they had 2 players 21 years or younger. Now they have 6, right? And they're having John Wall kind of scurry away so they can have their young players have more playing time, more usage, all that stuff. So it's pretty clear that they're leaning into that stuff, and they're taking a lot of stabs at like high level talent, right? Which I think is good. I think if you're a Rockets fan, like the fact that they're taking these kinds of swings, maybe they don't hit all the time. Like they were in the conversation for Damian Lillard, apparently, according to Brian Windhorst. So and obviously they probably weren't going to land him, but the fact that they're in those conversations, I think that's pretty good. You still have a very aggressive front office after Daryl Morey.
Yeah, and I mean they do have assets to move if they really wanted to go all in. But I think, as I would agree with everything you said there, and given the John Wall news that he's going to be at training camp and show up to media day, it sounds like, but he's not going to be with the team. I'm curious as to why they would do that. Maybe it's because they value his input with the locker room, or does he want to give interviews and say, hey, I'm 150%, I'm the player, whatever. This isn't a hot take, and it's no offense to John Wall. I'm glad he got paid. He has the worst contract in the NBA.
He does. Yeah.
2 years and $91 million. What's the most likely outcome here? And I'm asking you, one, can they actually find a move for him? And two, if they, or can they find a move for him, or is this going to inevitably end in a buyout, even though they say that's not going to happen, even though he probably doesn't want to give up money? And if you do see it ending, I know you've given thought to this. Are there any teams that you've talked yourself into as, okay, they could be actually willing to take on John Wall?
So let's backtrack a little bit. So they're having him coming into training camp because they want him to stay in shape. Do they want John Wall to be ready to go if they find that suitor? Will they find that suitor is a real question, though, right? I don't think they're. I wrote about this a little bit, right? I think there's two teams that I think I could see a John Wall trade with, and that's pretty much the Clippers or the Mavericks. And I'm not sure. I'm 100% sold the Mavericks. Really, it's the Clippers. If you're going to find a team, it's probably the Clippers. That the Rockets don't have to surrender multiple first-round picks to give up the Wall's contract. That's probably the one team where you don't have to do that with, because they have a bunch of aggregatable contracts, and you're really only talking about taking on $15 million of salary in 2023 and 2024 in terms of Luke Kennard if they were to do a trade. And that's a significant chunk of money. I'm not going to pretend like that's not nothing, but that also gets you in the door, and you don't have to give up a first round pick. You're taking on that extra money. So in exchange, you're not giving up that first round pick. They are in need of point guard play. They've been in need of point guard play Kawhi Leonard's entire tenure there. I think, it's pretty clear that if Kawhi Leonard is your best passer, you have a problem offensively. They have a bunch of well-fitting pieces. You just can't have Patrick Beverley stirring the drink, or Reggie Jackson, or Eric Bledsoe. You have to have someone better there. I think eventually that's probably going to have to be something that they're going to address. Maybe Eric Bledsoe is that guy for them. Maybe they decide Reggie Jackson, Eric Bledsoe, that's the combo we're going to go with, and we're just going to depend on our forwards for playmaking. I'm not sure if that's a long-term recipe to really contend with the Bucks and the Lakers of the world. That's the only team. And to be honest, I don't buy that either. I think this is headed towards a buyout. This really unraveled faster than I thought it was going to be. I thought all this stuff would happen next summer, and it's happening now, which kind of indicates I think the buyout will happen sooner rather than later. I think you're talking probably in February after the trade deadline. That's usually when the high-profile buyouts happen every year. And I think what you're looking at is the Rockets are going to do their best to find a suitor. They're going to work with, Clutch and Rich Paul, and they're going to come to the conclusion together. I think the Rockets probably already knew this, but to kind of sell it to Clutch, listen, there's not a suitor here. You're following us. You're following us along in every step of the process. Look around the market. Do you see a suitor? And at that point, you can sell it to them. You can give up if you can give up a few $1 million here or there, we can come to an agreement on a buyout. I'm not sure if they're willing to do a buyout, but I think that's probably their only course of resolution. What else could they possibly do? Unless they want to wait till next summer when he becomes an expiring contract, and maybe he's more valuable in trades. But at that point, I still think that's a long time for John Wall to be on the bench. And you're talking about a player that was out of the NBA for 2 years, didn't play basketball for 2 years. I don't think he wants to do that again. So it's going to be. It's probably going to result in a buyout. I don't think they're going to find a trade suitor. We'll see. The Rockets are pretty aggressive with this stuff, but I don't think they want to give up any first-round picks. That's really what it comes down to. I don't think, first of all, their first-round picks are pretty valuable, right? If they were going to trade their own first-round pick for 2022, that's probably going to be a lottery pick. And other than that, you're probably talking the Milwaukee pick that they own, the 2023 Milwaukee first-round pick. And I don't think they even want to give up that because they're a rebuilding team. Why would you give up assets as a rebuilding team when you don't have to? When you're really in the driver's seat here. And that's kind of the unique thing here with Clutch, right? They're usually always in the driver's seat of these situations. This is one where they're not because he's clearly a really bad contract. And everybody recognizes that. And he clearly needs to play more than the Rockets need him to play. And I think this is probably going to end up being a buyout, if I were to guess.
Yeah, it really comes down to whether they would be willing to give up assets to actually get him off. And I don't think it would have to be more than just that Milwaukee pick, which is why if you're them, you shouldn't want to do it. You're not at that stage of your development to do it. And that when people mention the Thunder, it's just they're not doing that for free, and they're not doing that based off how they've executed other, not similar trades, but salary dumps that they've taken on. They're not accepting a low end first for the remainder of John Wall's contract. It's just not happening.
Yeah, and when you talk about, I've heard the trades of what about a Kevin Love for John Wall swap? We're like, why would John Wall want to do that, right? I'm assuming
Cleveland want to do that. Kevin Love and Ricky Rubio, I guess, is the move. But you have Colin Sexton and Darius Garland there. Yeah. And if you're not trading Ricky Rubio, then now you have John Wall, Ricky Rubio, Darius Garland, and Colin Sexton there. Yeah. And if you're the Rockets, I guess breaking up John Wall into smaller contracts has value, but Kevin Love might be the second worst contract in the NBA. If not, he's probably one of the top 5, top 7 worst right now. So, yeah, it's the Clippers. I guess an ideal scenario for the Rockets would be maybe the Clippers start off slow. Their pick's already going to Oklahoma City this year, even though they don't have Kawhi Leonard. There is an incentive to win. Perhaps there's a sense of urgency to, hey, we need to do something to swing for the fences. Eric Bledsoe's been bad. You could then make that trade with Luke Kennard, which the contract isn't good, but if you're going to overpay someone or take on the longer-term salary, it might as well just be a motion shooter who can literally just plug and play beside whatever type of offense you want to run. And there are defensive limitations to him, but you can use him on the ball a little bit and he'll shoot. His knees are in question. I get it. That's far from the worst case scenario for me. And if you break up John Wall into smaller contracts, even if one of them is longer, there's still value in that. You can use those in other trades, or Luke Kennard isn't necessarily ancient. You can look at that. So that's sort of the one scenario I see as possible. Otherwise,
and the thing with Luke Kennard is if you really want cap space in 2023 and you feel like you're going to get a star player in that summer, well, you can dump him, right? At that point, if you really feel like you're going to get that level of player because you have that much cap space right now, well, then it's not that hard to move a $15 million contract.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say is I'm very much of the mind too, when you're using the cap space argument, make it when you need it. There's no point, the way we've seen extensions unfold, or stars just not really leaving in free agency, there's no point. And even the Knicks kind of made this decision where and I think correctly, the deals they signed this summer showed, say what you will about some of them, I wasn't a fan of all of them, they've decided that the next star is coming via trade instead of free agency. I'm not saying those contracts are assets, but they want to be good without giving up flexibility for later. And for any team that wants to sign a free agent, great. You will create the money. And I think we've seen Miami do it in the past. They'll make the money appear if they need it. So I'm definitely with you there.
No team can afford to overpay for talent. Build a championship team with Indeed, the smart way to only pay for quality candidates that meet your must-have requirements. When hiring gets hard, you need Indeed, the job site that makes hiring incredibly simple. Just attract, interview, and hire. In fact, with Indeed, you can do all of your hiring in just one place. Indeed knows how important it is to make the most of your recruiting hours and dollars. And with Indeed, you can save time and money by setting your must-have qualifications and only pay for the quality candidates that meet them. Get started right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Get a $75 credit at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Offer valid through September 30th. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey guys, looking for a betting advantage this football season? You need to download BetQL, the only app you'll need to compare betting odds and make smart bets. Their best bet computer model scans over 350,000 unique bets per year to give you a best bet recommendation for every game across all major sports and gives you the reasoning behind why you should place the bet. Their model covers everything from spreads, over-unders, and player prop bets. Don't want to use this model and prefer to do the research yourself? Well, BetQL has all the necessary tools for your betting research needs. Tools like line movement and sharp data on who the pros are backing, team summaries highlighting previous success against the spread and over-under, team lineup breaking news and injury status updates, and leaderboards to track how you stack up against others and to view your winning streaks. Better data, better bets. Head to the App Store or Google Play Store now to download BetQL. You can also head to try.betql.co/BlueWire to get started now. Enter the discount code BlueWire at payment checkout for 25% off any of their subscription offerings. Make sure to check out their offers page to find a special offer to receive a full free year of BetQL. Don't miss out on the chance to gain your betting advantage during this football season.
I would normally save this for the end of this whole segment, but because we're into the John Wall territory of it, it does seem that the Rockets might be, maybe it's just this case specifically, but they might be sort of thinking about the next moves, unloading veterans sooner than we've expected. Two names that I think are actually going to be semi-coveted is Daniel House, if he's healthy, on his expiring deal, and then Eric Gordon has 2 guaranteed years left on his contract with this season. Do you think that they'll look at moving one of them? Is there one you expect is going to be more likely to move than the other? Would you predict that both of them would be gone before last season? Where do you sort of stand on that whole situation with the two of them?
Eric Gordon's absolutely going to be gone by this point in February. It's just like he's too useful of a player, and his contract really isn't that bad. I know there are a lot of people that think that's a bad contract. I don't think it's that bad of a contract. When you look at like the amount of high-level playoff games that guy's been in and how useful he's been in those high-level playoff games, like I'm sure there's a contender out there that could use his services. I've actually written about some landing spots with him. I think Eric Gordon will be gone by this point. Daniel House, players like that usually expire all the time and go to different teams. I don't think there's that much of an urgency to move him. I mean, his value isn't that high. You might be able to get like a second-round pick for him, but it's whatever. It's not that big of a deal. I see Daniel House as more of an aggregatable contract where like you can really combine his salary with others. Like, let's just say the Rockets want to move David Nwaba, or they want to move, they just signed Dante Exum. If they want to aggregate Dante Exum's contract with Daniel House.
With that net rating incentive.
That is just the most Rockets thing I've ever heard of. Like, I've never heard of a net rating. It's like the Rockets did. I'm not sure if you remember Clint Capella's contract. They had a defensive rebounding rate in his contract. That's so nerdy. It's next level nerdy, and it's encouraging that they're still doing stuff like that under the new regime, because like it shows they're still thinking out of the box. But it's such a Rockets thing to do. But like I see, back to Daniel House, I see his contract as more of something you could aggregate with other smaller deals, and perhaps if whether you're looking to acquire an expiring contract or whether you're looking to acquire a better salary, I think that's probably where you're looking. That's probably where you're looking with Daniel House. I don't think it's possible that they just move him for a second round pick. It's not out of question at all. But I think Eric Gordon is definitely going to be moved.
I think Daniel House is absolutely going to be moved just because his salary is so small and the positional malleability he gives you on defense it's valuable. Like a team like Utah that really just needs more optionality on the wings, aside from Royce O'Neal, when you just look at how slow their wing defenders are. If that's his price leading into the trade deadline, especially if he's not shooting threes as well as he was, given what happened last year. But Eric Gordon's interesting because I honestly don't know, but I would agree with you that he should be viewed as valuable. People probably worried about his age, about his health history. But last year, before he was injured, he shot 58.2% on drives, which was the 6th best mark among 143 players who averaged at least 5 drives per game. And so the only players in front of him were Luka, Jalen Brunson, Joe Ingles, LeBron, and Giannis. He gives you real downhill jet fuel. And those super deep threes, even when he's not hitting them, defenses still respect him. So he's spacing the floor. And so he's opening pockets of space for everyone else. And the other thing is, you've mentioned it with the playoffs, he's like held up defensively against wings. And I know he's getting older. I know there's the injury history, but if you're looking for like the non-blockbuster move, a gettable guy who shouldn't cost you too much draft equity, because I do think if you're the Rockets, there's probably, you want something for him at this point, unless he completely flops this year. But like, you're probably just as interested in getting his money. If you can get an expiring contract for him, that opens up things that you can do moving forward as well. So I think he should be moved. It's just the number that's left on his deal I still think it's prohibitive. But it's, you mentioned the incentives. His incentive is also funny, where it's like that third year becomes guaranteed if they win the title, he makes an all-star team, whatever it was. Like the Rockets contract incentives remain undefeated. They're hysterical.
Yeah. And like in 2019, just that we're talking just 2 years ago, name like 7 better role players in the NBA than Eric Gordon. That guy was really, really freaking good. And I do think, the money, I really don't think it's as prohibitive as like a lot of people think it is. And I think I would venture to guess that they get a first back for him. I do. Yeah, I think they get a first back for him. It may not be a good first. I mean, it's probably not going to be a good first because they're going to be trading with a contender because a rebuilding team's not going to acquire Eric Gordon. But here's the thing with Houston. Like, if you look at what their salary cap situation is, John Wall and Eric Gordon at this current point, they expire in 2023. In 2023, they're going to have 2 max cap spots, and that's it. The cap space is gone because they're going to have to worry about the extensions of Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr., a lot of the draft picks they just drafted are going to be good. I'm not sure if all of them are going to require extensions, but maybe Alperen Sengun requires an extension. Those guys are going to get paid, so you're only going to have one summer to use all that cap space. So what incentive is there to move Eric Gordon for a non-favorable deal? If you're taking back really bad money, or if you're taking back a salary that doesn't expire by that point, we'd just rather keep him because you're set up in such a way where you're opening up again 2 max cap spots in 2023. I think that's probably what Houston's rebuild timeline is actually. I think they want to get attractive by that point to where you start trying to recruit free agents and maybe try to do what the Hawks did even last year. Even if you can't land like a max caliber free agent, acquire the best possible role players in the market and become good. Make that your timeline because you only have one summer to use up all this money.
2 years, $37.8 million is what's left on his deal. That's, if they get a first, that'll be impressive. I guess a lot depends on. I agree that they won't and shouldn't take on salary that extends noticeably past his 2-year guarantees, and that definitely you don't want it more expensive. But if you can just get one of these larger expiring contracts for him, I wonder if that starts the conversation for them. I guess a lot though just depends on what he looks like to start the season. I didn't list this when I sent you the outline, but it's been popping up. What is the Ben Simmons to Houston stuff? Is just, I know people sort of made it a joke. I'm more fascinated in the sense, like, I don't understand it because I don't see the pathway to Ben Simmons ending up in Houston at this point.
Yeah, when I did my John Wall trade destination column, I put the Sixers in there as kind of a throw-in, and even in the paragraph where I talked, the little blurb I put next to the Sixers, like I was like, I don't see this happening. I like if they're going to trade for Ben Simmons, it's going to require multiple first-round picks. As Ben Simmons is one of the best defensive players in the NBA. In the fast break, he's an absolute menace. He's still really, really valuable. I think. What you see on Twitter is not his actual trade value. I think when you look at what his return is going to be when the Sixers do eventually move him, I think it's going to be better than what most people expect right now. I think right now his consensus value is probably too low. I think general managers probably see that better than your average Joe Schmo on Twitter. I think he's if he gets traded for John Wall, I'm drastically undervaluing what he is what I'm saying.
Right. And I even thought about it in the context of, well, what if it's like a 3-team deal for the other team doesn't want Ben Simmons and they're facilitating it? Like the players they're sending out are Christian Wood, Eric Gordon, Daniel House, and then other stuff. But it's also like, why are you giving up? I would do that for Ben Simmons. I think he's fantastic. He's, like you said, he's an amazing defensive player. He has some playmaking ability. I don't know that Houston's roster is the best fit for him, but if you surround him with enough shooting, I know people said Philly did that last year, but Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, like, they're just not a utopian fit right now. I don't see. I can understand the logic of the interest, and of course, if his value bottomed out, but you're not trading John Wall and getting Ben Simmons. That's not happening in the same transaction. That's just absolutely not happening.
No, if that happens, like the Sixers should get creamed unless they're getting like an insane amount of draft equity. The Sixers should get killed for that in the media.
And even then, that would represent a pivot because they're then deciding we're taking draft equity rather than actual talent back when we have a title window to win now with Joel Embiid. That would be fascinating if that happens. What are your thoughts on Christian Wood leading into this year? There's increasing in experience around him, I would say. You're also removing, I don't know that John Wall changed your fortunes a bunch, but he does. They're not like flush with point guard options right now. And so that's someone who might have been able to simplify the game a little bit for him. Wood was fantastic when he was healthy last year. Do you think playing within this roster could hurt him at all? And I think the bigger question for me is, and we've talked about this before, is this sort of an under the radar trade candidate to watch? Because he has 2 years left on his deal. And I'm not of the mind that, oh, you need to trade all these guys instead of paying them. But when you're a team like the Rockets, he's extension eligible after this season because of the 2 years being done. He's on probably one of the best contracts in the league right now. When you look at his pay grade relative to his performance last season, why are you shelling out what could be a ton of money to keep him when you're just so obviously not going to be at that point in your development where you are ready to win?
Yeah, here's what I always say with this conversation. At this point next season, right? So the start of next season, Christian Wood is going to be 27 years old and on an expiring contract. And the rest of the Rockets roster, or the rest of the Rockets core rather, is going to be still on their rookie deals with several years remaining. So like I just, it's hard for me to envision a long-term, future for him in Houston. I will say this. They have so much money coming up in 2023 where like if they swing and miss on all their intended targets, Christian Wood's not like the worst consolidation prize, to use up all that money. So they're not in any rush to move him right now, but I think they really need to start having that conversation if they haven't already at this point next summer.
Do you think that he'll be fine playing within this roster, that he'll be able to deliver an adequate encore to what he was doing last season?
Yeah, he's a good player, man. Like I like Christian Wood. He's got his warts, not the best playmaker, not the best defender, but that's not what the Rockets are asking of him, right? Like the Rockets are asking him to be a pick and pop threat, and be whatever he can be whenever he gets the basketball in his hands. I think as far as what the Rockets envision for him next year, I may actually disagree with that vision. I get the sense that they're going to start Daniel Tice at center and start Christian Wood at power forward next season.
Really?
Yeah, I think that was the whole impetus behind the Tice signing. I don't agree with that vision. I think Christian Wood's a center. I think, I think, it's really hard to find the ideal power forward to place next to him just because of his defensive limitations. But I'd rather work on trying to find that now than misplace where he is, long term. Because I don't think he's mobile enough to play power forward. And the Rockets in general are going to be pretty immobile in their starting lineup. So I don't like that fit. I actually liked what he was playing before. I liked Jae'Sean Tate starting next to Christian Wood. And it makes sense to me because Jae'Sean Tate's not the best shooter right now. And when you're not the best shooter, downsizing you is not the worst idea. I like the idea of Jae'Sean Tate as a power forward until he figures the shooting stuff out. And it just makes a lot of sense. I like that fit better than Tice and Wood starting next to each other. But the Rockets really liked what they saw with Kelly Olynyk next to Christian Wood. I guess this is kind of like their advancement of that. They think Tice is a better defender than Olynyk. He can make up for whatever Christian Wood isn't as a rim protector. And, some of that's true. I just don't agree with that offensive vision.
Yeah, and look, the luxury of Christian Wood, and he, we mentioned everything about him on offense. His floor game is really nice too. And so he can play the four on offense because it gives you the range and there is the level of stuff he can do with the ball in his hands. But it's like you said, it creates issues on defense. And it also seems like, you do have to think about how you're fleshing out the front court rotation around him. And so some minutes with Daniel Tice, fine. But you do have Jae'Sean Tate, like you mentioned. You also have Usman Garuba there now too, who could be a defensive monster. I know he's a rookie, but those are still two guys that I would think you can put it to four, play next to Wood, and that's something to watch. And the other issue I would say there is like then you're sort of thinning out unnecessarily your center rotation at this point because Wood and Tice, to me, when you look at this roster, are your centers. Like who else are you playing? Sengun at center? Are you downsizing to like the upteenth degree and playing Garuba? They're like, what happens with the backup 5 minutes if you're playing Tice next to Wood?
Yeah, I think Sengun's going to play backup 5 next season. Like the way their rotations, squaring out right now, I think that's what they intend for him next season. I think he's probably going to be the rookie with the second most minutes on the roster next season because of the role he's going to be asked to play. I'm not sure how they're going to interchange, like as far as their rotations go, like which guys play which players the best. But my guess is that's what they see Again, if it were me, I probably would have. Here's the thing: the Daniel Tice contract is so good, so I understand why they would sign it. Right? It's just a great value, and it's something you can get a return for him in the future. So I understand like in free agency, these are the kind of moves that Houston should be doing. Basketball wise, it's not the best fit right now.
Before I sort of get into the youngsters, how do you think them sort of, I don't want to say giving up on John Wall, but just deciding that John Wall is not a part of this team, what does that do to the primary playmaker pecking order for a roster that, even with John Wall, was sort of hard up for, there are guys who could generate their own shots, but who can elevate the play of the teammates around them with their table setting. They just don't have a ton of options. Are they going to default to leaning hard on a veteran like DJ Augustine, or do we see KPJ get more reps at point guard this year? What is the impact of now not having John Wall there on their sort of floor general vision?
Yeah, the Rockets are sending a pretty clear message here in that they view Kevin Porter Jr. as their point guard of the future, right? Wow. Like they think he is the guy at that position for them. And listen, I really like his playmaking. Like what he did last season when he came to Houston as a passer, I just thought was really impressive. And I didn't know he had that in his game, to be honest. Like he got the James Harden comparisons in college. I just thought that was weird. I didn't see that with him. But in terms of the passing, I definitely do see his position in the NBA headed in that direction. He was viewed as this shooting guard, small forward prospect, and that's kind of what Cleveland used him as. And I thought that was kind of the wrong way to use him. I thought that was kind of putting him in a box. He played 0% of his minutes in 2019 at point guard. Like, you're not going to try it. Like, I get you got Con Sexton and Darius Garland there, but you got to at least, see what he can do with the ball in his hands. And I like that Houston right away when he got there, like he obviously spent his time in the G League with the Vipers. Then when it became pretty clear that he was an NBA player, they made him a starting point guard. And I think that's kind of what they envisioned for him. I think Jalen Green I think Jalen Green as a playmaker has a lot of room to grow. So the Rockets really need to figure out like what kind of playmaker do we put next to him? And I'm guessing that this is kind of their first stab at like, can this guy be our solution to the playmaking? We'll see. His assist to turnover ratio last year was god awful. He's really bad defensively, and the shooting efficiency is actually not as good as many people think. Right? He has a lot of areas to improve as a basketball player. Like he shot like 53% true shooting last season. He turned the ball over like 4 times per 36 minutes. And that was again like on 7 assists per 36 minutes. It's not great. But if he put in the work this summer, I am intrigued to see it. Like I think, he does deserve a spot in the early betting most improved conversation because of the role the Rockets are going to give him and the amount of minutes he's going to play. I think as far as playmaking on the roster, I mean, who else is a playmaker on the roster besides Kevin Porter Jr. and DJ Augustine? I don't see it. Like it's, I don't think they're going to ask Dante Exum to do it. I don't think they're going to ask Alperen Sengun to do it. It's going to be him. It's going to be him and DJ Augustine, and we'll see how that works out for them. It could be pretty rough next year for Houston.
And KPJ showed more flair for passing than I ever thought that he would have last year. And
Same.
Just like even some making the quick decisions, some of his passes just felt like pure anarchy where it was just after a ton of dribbling, but there was also just like, some two-handed no look stuff. And it felt like the feel might be there. And so I'm very interested to see it. But then you look at sort of the offensive talent around him and you wonder if you're putting him at you'd be putting anyone, I guess, at a little bit of the service there. I'm also wondering how this sort of then informs, and you kind of already touched upon this, what happens with Jalen Green. He did play a lot off the ball last year in the G League. Do you think he's given carte blanche from day one? Because he was so fun to watch in Summer League, and I try not to see Summer League as too instructive, but I was in on Jalen Green to begin with, and I'm just so far in on him now because I do think for someone who didn't necessarily have the ungoverned agency to create at will last year, that aspect of his game might actually be there. And if you can toggle between playing on or off the ball like that, that ends up being huge. But for a Rockets team that also needs someone to then direct everyone else and provide some semblance of an offensive identity to the players around them, I don't know if that's overstretching him right away in that role.
Yeah, I have concerns about the playmaking with Jalen Green. Like I think that's going to be a long-term thing with him that he's going to have to grow and work on. But his ability in the pick and roll in summer league was really impressive. I did not think that he's just much more polished than anybody could have imagined already. But again, he hasn't played an NBA minute yet, so we'll see how that works out. But yeah, I think he is going to be given carte blanche. He's going to have an insanely high usage next season. I mean, there's a reason he is. I think he's co-favorites of Rookie of the Year with Cade Cunningham. I'm not sure. I haven't checked the odds as of recently, but there's a reason he's pretty high up there. He's going to have the ball a lot, and this Wall decision only gives him more of that. So I think when you're talking about building around him long term, you're going to have to figure out a long-term playmaking option, unless he suddenly surprises people and becomes like a 7-8 assists a game guy, which I don't see for him. But if he surprises people, that I guess you don't have to do that. But I do think when you talk about building around him, I look at last year's Suns as a model of like, if you can find like a veteran guard like Chris Paul to play next to him. Obviously not now. It's going to be a long time till they get to that position where they're actually attractive enough to trade for that kind of a player. But if you can get to a point where you can find a player like that, or even someone in the front court to do some of the playmaking, my point is he's not going to be that guy. At least that's what I see from watching him, not only in the G League, but some of the summer league stuff.
I'm with you on the pick and roll. I can't remember who he threw it to because it's a summer league roster, but he I think it was against the Cavs, and he just threw a bounce pass between two defenders out of the pick and roll to find the roller. And I think that's something that he could certainly handle. And when you're working with Christian Wood and Daniel Tice, they're not necessarily those like explosive guys towards the rim, but if they're going to pick and pop, you can run the same stuff with them. Even Christian Wood, who has natural floor game and can put the ball on the floor, they might be able to do some interesting two-man things with them. But it's sort of I am with you in the sense that I don't know if he can be your top assist guy. I don't want to measure just an assist, but your top playmaker. Still, I might be more inclined. I'm more of a believer in him now after watching him in summer league doing some of that stuff than I was beforehand.
Yeah, my point is I just don't see him as like the heliocentric offensive guy right now. Like right. I think I see him more as your Zach LaVine type, which is good. If you can get to 5 or 6 assists per game, that's pretty good. It's not where you need to be as the lead playmaker. That's kind of where I think, you have this in your rundown when you talk about players that Houston should target long term. I think playmakers are definitely something I would put high up on the totem pole.
You're an Alperen Sengun guy. We've actually talked about this in DMs about how you are and how I am not. Can you, one, were you comfortable with the price that they paid to get him? And 2, can you sell me on Alperen Sengun, who just feels like too much of a throwback player where he's going to end up being like a wannabe Domantas Sabonis that I don't think is as good as Sabonis? What am I missing here about him?
So I hear what you're saying, right? I think a lot of people look at Sengun and think, oh, this guy's just Enes Kanter part 2, right? And I don't see that, right? Like I think he's more than the post player, right? He's an awesome post player, right? Like he has great touch around the rim, all the counters, all that stuff, right? But he's a great screen and dive guy and a guy that can actually run the floor. And I think a lot of people, just don't see that with him. But in Turkey, that's certainly what he did a lot. And efficiency wise, he gets to the free throw line like crazy. Like he's a monster foul baiter. And we'll see how the NBA rules, the new NBA rules impact that. But I do think he's going to be able to get to the free throw line a lot if he has the ball in his hands. I think he's more than just that post up guy offensively. But as a floor spacer, that's going to be an area of growth for him. Like he is not a good 3-point shooter right now. I do think he has that jump shot in his repertoire, right? He's a good mid-range shooter and a good free throw shooter. So I think he can eventually become a good 3-point shooter. It's not there yet. So I like having him as a backup center or even playing in the G League for a season, to work on that kind of stuff. And NBA defense, listen, like that's going to be a problem for him. I'm not going to pretend like it's not. I'm not going to pretend like he's a great defender, but it's one of those things where like he is so positive in all these other areas. And again, he was the MVP for the 3rd best league in the world, like at 19 years old. And you look at guys who have done that, it's a pretty small list. And at the number 18 position, if you can get players of that caliber, you can't be upset. Obviously, they paid a decent price tag for him. Those picks are pretty heavily protected. The Washington pick and the Detroit pick are
forever.
Yeah, they're pretty far into the future. They're mystery boxes. I'm not going to say they're not good picks. Like nobody knows if they're good picks yet. Nobody knows how Detroit or Washington are going to be for the next few years, right? It's just hard to kind of peg that. But they could be lottery picks. And if you're talking about trading 2 lottery picks for Sengun, that's a pretty hefty price tag. But he is one of the guys in the draft where like I think he has like Kevin Love upside, like Kevin Love in his prime upside. And if you're talking about getting that, like trading 2 lottery picks for the potential for drafting that kind of guy, I think it's worth it. Like I thought on my board, he was number 7. And I think in any other draft, he could have been top 4, top 5. So I'm really high on the guy. I think he has all-star potential at his absolute ceiling. I think his medium range of outcomes is a really, really productive NBA player that is probably a starter eventually. Not now. I don't think he's ready for that now, but I think in his medium range of outcomes, he is a starter.
He was good in summer league too, to his credit. His foot speed with the ball in his hands, I feel like I'm watching something unfold in slow motion, and I'm curious how that translates.
I'm sorry, I forgot to add. Great passer.
He is,
awesome. Yeah, like great passer, sees things develop on the court better than most bigs. That he also has that.
He's going to throw at least 1 to 5 nifty bounce passes a game, it looks like, based off what I saw from him in summer league. I didn't know much about him until I did the crash course before the draft, but his foot speed on the ball, it feels like I'm watching it in slow motion, which I guess if you're going to be a 5 isn't much of a problem. But then the defense that you mentioned, it is sort of slow-footed, especially laterally on defense there. I just thought the way I looked at it was I see those first-round picks that they gave up from Detroit and Washington, respectively, as first-round picks that are eventually going to convey. Maybe they're lottery picks, maybe they're not. I viewed it as picks that you gave up 2 first-round picks over the next, I guess half decade they're going to convey at some point over the next half decade for Alperen Sengun. And if you thought they were going to convey imminently, when you kind of have like the Nets stuff conveying and you have your own picks for the next 2 years, I would have gotten it more. But those also seem like the kind of picks that are probably going to convey a little bit distantly. It's impossible to know, I will say, because it's so far into the future. So we have to wait years to see how this plays out. I just thought it was one of those deals that I hated for both sides, by the way, because I just thought OKC, even as bad as they're trying to be, just needed an infusion of talent. And then with Houston, it's like, given where you're at in your development, consolidating anything just felt bizarre. I don't hate it. I just felt a little bit something about it feels off. But if Sengun turns out to be one of the 10 best players in this draft, then you probably ended up making the right decision.
Yeah, and I think as a rim protector, he's probably better than a lot of people expect of him. He's again, the foot speed stuff and the switching, like that's probably never going to come for him, right? I think you're probably going to have to tailor make a defense around him. But as a rim protector, he's got pretty decent instincts. He knows where to be. He communicates. Obviously, that communication has to get better. He doesn't speak English quite well right now, but at some point he'll get there. Yeah, I'm just high on the guy. I'm really high on the guy. And the Rockets have an incentive to get good in the next few years because they have these picks going to Oklahoma City. And if those picks are really good, like that could be devastating towards their rebuild, right? Like, it's not just like a PR thing. That's an opportunity cost. And I think that they made this move with that in mind. This was definitely a swing. I'm not going to pretend like it wasn't a swing. This was one of their big swings, but I like the swing.
So they have 2 other first-round picks in the roster, Josh Christopher, Usman Garuba. I could not believe that Garuba fell to 24. I think the biggest thing there was teams weren't sure that he was going to come over. He ended up being able to broker a buyout and is coming over. I am not someone who has watched him like hours upon hours, but I have seen him, watched highlights, watched film of him. I am in love with him. I think he's going to bring so much defensive malleability to the NBA, and I thought that was a fantastic pick by them. Do you have any strong impressions of him or opinions of him or Josh Christopher? Can we expect? I think it's pretty clear. And the other thing I'll add, by the way, quickly on Sengun, what they're doing with Tyson Wood, while neither of us are in love with, I think it might ultimately end up benefiting Sengun because I do think he should be a 5 in the NBA based off how he plays. And that's going to make it easier for them to play him at the 5 in backup minutes. So there's a benefit to that. But it's clear that he's going to get minutes. It's clear that obviously Jalen Green is going to get minutes. How much do you anticipate the Rockets relying on Garuba and Josh Christopher in their year ones.
Those guys aren't playing. They're going to be playing for the Vipers.
Okay.
I mean, if you look at it, they have 9 players on their roster that are 25 years or older. So they have a ton of vets. It's hard to envision Houston as that kind of team, but they are that kind of team. They have to unload some of these vets at some point to get some actual, draft capital back. But until they get there, they're not going to be playing a whole lot. I think there may be time for Christopher at some point when they trade Eric Gordon. I think there may be time for him, but Garuba, I don't think. I think he's going to be spending the bulk of his time with the Vipers next year. And the Tyson Wood thing, like I think a big part of that is like this also relieves some pressure to like make him that guy, right? Like he doesn't have to play. He doesn't have to have a lot of usage. He doesn't have to play a bunch of minutes. He's the backup center for this team, and it's a bad team. So there's not this high amount of pressure for him to succeed right away. But I think those guys are, Sengun, I think was probably the best defensive player outside of the NBA. I don't think that's crazy. I think he's really, really good and really, really like laterally moves his feet really well. Great communicator, all that stuff. Can play a few different positions. I was like you. I didn't think he would fall to 23. That was insane. That was insane that many teams let him fall that much. But it is kind of worrying that the shooting is something he has to work on, right? I think that's probably why he fell. There are probably NBA front office they didn't have confidence in his jumper, and that's probably going to be something he has to work on with the Vipers.
And the Rockets aren't exactly built to give him extra space, like to just have someone on the floor who's maybe not even playing the 5 and can't shoot. I get that. I will say I hope you're wrong that they don't use him because his crunch time block in the Summer League game against the Blazers, I'm all Usman Garuba. I'm just absolutely sold on his defensive potential. Jae'Sean Tate, all of a sudden, basically like one of the veterans on this team. Basically, everyone knows how valuable he is on defense. What do the Rockets need to see more of from him in year 2? Is it really as simple as us saying, he needs to hit more of his threes? Do you anticipate him getting even more responsibility on the ball, where he showed that he could be really like sort of a bully? His handle feels a little bit loose at time, but he does, I think, for people who maybe didn't watch him as often as you did, he really does do more provide you more. He's really good with moving without the ball too. Like it seems like he finds sort of these, space vacuums, but he can overpower some guys if he's near the rim or even when he's kind of going downhill. I don't know what I envision for him necessarily offensively moving forward.
That's just a guy that knows how to play basketball. Like whenever I watch Tate, that's just what I think of. And like, he knows where to be on the floor. He's a good ball handler. I mean, a lot of people don't know this. Like he was playing shooting guard overseas before he came to the Rockets, and then he became essentially a forward for Houston. And it's probably his natural fit. He is a bit undersized, but I think he makes up for it. I think he's probably going to play starting small forward for Houston next season. But the shooting definitely has to come along. That is a concern. He is 25 years old. I think a lot of people think of him as like this 22-year-old that the Rockets just got last year. Yeah, he's 25, and shooting is something that it's a hit or miss in terms of development in the NBA. I think people view this as like something that's really easy to catch on. Like, no, that's probably ball handling. It's more easier to become a better ball handler than it is to become a better shooter in the NBA. That's going to be something that I'm going to watch for with him next year. Other than that, the guy's a stud defensively, man. He's just awesome. Like I did not think he was going to be that good. I didn't think he was going to play as much. And, during the preseason, he got the starting spot on one of their preseason games. I was like, really? Like he's doing that well in training camp? And apparently he was, because that starting spot never went away.
Look, he's absolutely fantastic. You need him to hit more than he did. Shoot almost 60% on twos, which definitely helps his case. But you need him to shoot better than 30.8% from 3. I'm a believer in shooting is difficult to come along, but if defenses aren't, they're going to leave him open. And if you can hit set threes, that's doable. I just don't know who's teeing him up for set threes on this roster. If it's not Green or KPJ, like it's going to be a little bit of an issue. I am interested to see, just based off how I think he moves off the ball. I'm free to disagree. And if you're going to play Sengun, there might be, if some Sengun passes to Jae'Sean Tate might become like a league pass guilty pleasure for some basketball nerds. And I can envision myself falling in love with a play like that.
Yeah, and I think KPJ will find him too. Like I think that's a guy who knows where guys are on the floor. He may not always make the right basketball decision, may turn the ball over a lot. The thing with KPJ is he doesn't quite have a tight enough handle yet. Like he loses the ball far too much for what is going to be a point guard next season. If you remember his 50-point game, his 50-point 12-assist game, he almost turned the ball over by just dribbling too high on one of those possessions, and he eventually got a step back three out of it. Like cool, but like that kind of stuff is definitely going to be something that he needs to work on. Yeah, it's going to be the playmaking is going to be an issue. I actually view Tate as more of a power forward in the NBA. And
I do too. I think it's a mistake to start him at the 3, but please go on.
Yeah, and I think have the idea of him next to Garuba, or not next to Garuba, next to Sengun. I think that's pretty appealing. As you work on Garuba's development in the background, I think that's not the worst idea. And I think he's just a good player. He's just a good player. I think the shooting is he needs to hit like 34% from 3. And on catch and shoots, he needs to hit like 36, 37%.
And it'll be if he does do that, he just becomes one of the best. You can't even call him 3-and-D because I think he provides more value on offense than that, away from the ball, inside the arc and all that stuff. He just becomes like one of the single most valuable role. I feel like role players people take as an insult, but complementary players in the NBA if he ends up hitting his catch and shoot threes at a league average or slightly better clip.
And have you seen his contract? It's the Hinkie special. It's the Hinkie special. They gave him the Hinkie special, and I think that's because he was just undervalued by the league. It's a huge hit for Rafael Stone. You know, like it's like he was hyping him up a lot going into the season, and a lot of people were just kind of like shrugging, like, okay, we'll see. Like nobody had ever seen this guy play in the NBA. And he was right. Like that's an arrow he has in his quiver, that he got that pick right, and the Kenyon Martin Jr. pick, which Kenyon Martin Jr. was a guy that probably wasn't supposed to be drafted last season, and he got drafted, and now it looks like he probably should have been drafted higher. That guy is like legitimately a freak athlete. Like he tries to dunk on somebody every single game, and he always misses, but it's always entertaining to see him attempt it. Like he always tries to dunk on somebody off of a rebound. And defensively, like I do see the versatility there. And the shooting with him developed so quickly, came out of nowhere. He shot 37% from 3 last year or something like that. Might have been 36.5% or something like that. And that was an area of concern for him coming out of the draft. The fact that he was that good coming out of his first season in the NBA, it's pretty impressive to me. Again, like I'm just mentioning, like these are arrows in Rafael Stone's quiver as a general manager and as a talent evaluator. Like I'm still trying to gather data on him because again, he's only been a general manager for 16 months or something. Yeah. But like this is it's pretty impressive what he's been able to find on the scrap heap.
Yeah, and look, Kenyon Martin Jr. showed some. I was going to ask you about him or give you the opportunity to talk about him. So you're assuming will play a role, like a regular role on this team? He's
going to play the backup power forward, and yeah, I think.
Which he's not. By the way, he's not all that big. He just jumps like he is. As someone who could he could legitimately be a help rim protector at what is he 6'6", 6'5", whatever he is right now.
Yeah, it's not hard to tell who his dad was. Like He doesn't make it that subtle. But yeah, it's an exciting young group, and I think Kenyon Martin Jr. is one of those guys. That are like, I want to see how he does second year in the NBA. See if the shooting holds up, and if the shooting holds up, that's John Lucas is like a really heralded guy in the NBA as a player development coach, and that's a success story if you can get Kenyon Martin to be a good 3-point shooter in the NBA.
This team is going to be bad on offense. And I think the expectation is that they're going to be bad on defense too because of, I guess, just the sheer youth. But I kind of look at this roster, and I'm like, you already said Garuba might not play, and he is a rookie, so fine. But if David Nwaba is healthy, you have Daniel Tice now, you have Jae'Sean Tate. If Kenyon Martin Jr. is going to play, like, is there a chance that this team surprises people on defense, or do we just assume that they're going to be absolutely terrible on that end of the floor?
Okay, so you said surprise, and I was ready to shut you down because what you put in the rundown, you said that they were going to be an above average defense. No way in hell.
First of all, I asked you. I never would have picked that. But if I give you an over under of 23rd in points allowed per possession,
I'd probably still say, you know what? I'll say they're like 22nd. I'll take the under, I guess. Yeah, I'll take the under.
I don't even know how you would go about that. Yeah, whatever. You'll take that's fine.
yeah. I think they're still going to be bottom 10, but I think they'll be better than last year. But here's the thing, like, I mean, and you know this, defense in the NBA is really simply like how many good defenders are in your main rotation, and how many good defenders are in your starting lineup. The Rockets have 2 of those guys in their starting lineup, like Daniel Tice and Jae'Sean Tate. Outside of that, they have some of the worst defenders in basketball. Like Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen Green's a rookie, Christian Wood. Like it's not great. And those, like, I'm not sure Tice is going to be able to make up for all of the.
There was like worst KPJ, sure, but are you looking at Christian Wood or even Jalen Green, just even based off what he shows up? Like, are those going to be some of the worst defenders in the league? That feels like a bit strong.
I think Jalen Green will be one of the worst defenders in the league. Maybe Christian Wood, can get to average, or
if he's at the 5, I think he'll be okay. But you did just say that he's going to play a bunch with Daniel Tice, so
yeah. So I think he can probably get to slightly below average or average. So maybe I'm being too harsh on him. I think Jalen Green, like I wasn't high on his defense going into the NBA, and he is a rookie as well. So I think he's going to be pretty bad next season as a defensive player. But yeah, I don't have that much confidence in them being a good defense. I think they'll be better because they have a lot more health this season. They had a ton of injuries last year, and they had a bunch of COVID misses. And like I think this season's gonna be better for that. But still, it's not great. It's not great when like Jae'Sean Tate is like your best defender. Like he's very good, but like he's not good enough to carry what this is going to be next year.
It's also tough to know because if you end up moving Gordon or Daniel House, like then there's a chance you just get worse defensively, especially if House is playing and you're moving him. So I don't know what I would pick, but I just look at the talent. I do feel like if they're going to be better than expected on one end of the floor, I think it's defense because I don't see the pathway to it necessarily for them on offense.
I think they'll have more shooting than last year. Eric Gordon's going to be healthy we'll see. I mean, knock on wood, I guess. Eric Gordon is coming back, and I think that was a big reason they were one of the worst three-point shooting teams in basketball last year. Like he is, if you look at what the Rockets have been in the James Harden era, there's always a strong correlation to when Eric Gordon is playing and their team's three-point shooting. So I think they'll be a better three-point shooting team. A lot of those attempts were just going to like awful three-point shooters.
It's also kind of hard to be worse than 29th in three-point accuracy. So there's no way to go but up almost for them.
And this is a team that shoots like 45 threes a game or something. Like I don't remember what it was, but they shoot a ton of three-pointers per game.
They were still in the top 3 of the percentage of their total shot attempts that came from three-point range last year. So they're going to get them up.
Yeah, and Jalen Green's a good shooter. Like I think he'll be a positive on that end. Yeah, it's not great. Like I'm not going to pretend like they're going to be the 2018 Rockets by any means, but like they're going to. I think they'll be better as far as 3-point shooting. But you're right. I think defense is definitely probably a better area of improvement.
We kind of already tackled this really quickly. The biggest void on this team is that they still need that guy that you're going to look at and say he is our primary playmaker. He is our offensive engine, and maybe it could be KPJ, but you're still unsure there. And ditto for Jalen Green, who might just end up being more in like I'm not comparing these two directly, but when you think of a Kawhi Leonard or Paul George or even Kevin Durant as a playmaker, where they might get maybe he gets to a point where it's 4 or 5 assists a game. 1, is that going to happen next season? I don't know. But 2, you probably don't want him running your offense. And so that's still what this team needs most, right?
Yeah, this team first and foremost needs a star. I know we're kind of assuming in this exercise that Jalen Green will be that guy, but I just want to put it out there. No, he hasn't played a minute of NBA basketball. We don't know if he's going to be a star.
I think it helps that they at least have that tentpole prospect where there are some teams that, and yeah, I'm with you. They still need a star, but like when you're looking at specific archetype, it would be the primary playmaker.
Yeah, assuming he hits his potential, I agree with you. Yeah, they need playmakers and defenders. That's what they need for the like long term, like building out theoretically this team. That's what I would target if I were Houston. That like again, I look at the Suns last season. I'm like, that's the archetype, man. Like you got to build a team like that.
This is a tough question for this team. What do you think is going to be the most effective or most used closing lineup for them? We're operating under the assumption that they're going to be close games that they want to win, which is always one. Those lineups are definitely a lot matchup based, but two, they might fuck around towards the end of the year because there is or even during the entire year, because there is the market. What they're doing right now, which is smart by leaning into sort of the rebuilding mode right now, is there is a market inefficiency when you look at the rest of the NBA of teams that aren't actively trying to win a bunch right now. It feels like there are only between like 4 or 5 teams that are only care about later. The Rockets are one of them. So it makes it tough to judge not only how many close games they'll be in, but like what are they going to actually try and field the best talent down those stretches, pander more so to we want to just generate more experience. We're going to see all the youngsters in crunch time. But if you had to guess, what would be the best crunch time lineup for this team down the stretch of close games?
So one difference between this front office and this coaching staff and the last front office and the last coaching staff is they're much more traditional as far as positions go, right? Like they like Eric Gordon played all of his minutes at shooting guard last year, whereas under Mike D'Antoni played a ton of small forward.
Right.
So like, and that goes on down the line. Like they really wanted to get a center before, when they thought they were going to keep Harden, they really wanted to pair a traditional center with him. So I think they're not going to play a small ball lineup in crunch time next season. If I were to guess, I would say Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen Green, Daniel House, and Jae'Sean Tate and Christian Wood. That's probably who I would peg as their closing lineup right now.
You're the coach or GM. This isn't what quirky lineup do you think they're going to try, but you have the option of telling them you have to test out this lineup. What is an offbeat, unconventional 5-man unit you want to see them play?
I want to see them play Eric Gordon as small forward. Okay, I want to see them play Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen Green, Eric Gordon, and Jae'Sean Tate and Christian Wood. It's not that different, actually. It's not that different from what I think they're going to do. I don't think they're going to play small. Like I think their lineup actually, their roster actually suits well to Christian Wood playing center in crunch time.
So I'm going a little bit more off the walls here. I'll provide an answer to this because this is my favorite question of every single team podcast that I ask. I'm sort of along the same lines as you. I want to see, it's basically just all youth for them with the exception. I want to see Jae'Sean Tate. I want to see KPJ. I want to see Jalen Green. I want to see Josh Christopher. And then I want to see Usman Garuba at the 5. Make it happen. That's your small ball lineup. I would argue, again, this was supposed to be an off the walls question. And like you said, based off,
I'm not very off the walls to be fair. I'm very conservative with this kind of stuff. So but
you're also basing it off of, you're saying that this front office has put more value in maybe traditional lineup setups than the previous regime. I'm just wondering, it was like when the Hawks were not very good yet, but you wanted to see the all youth lineup. Mm-hmm. Give me the all. I'm putting youth in quotes because I know Jae'Sean Tate is the age of a veteran, but just lean into that. And I am such a big Garuba fan. And I think that down the line, given what he does defensively and then the role that he probably needs to play on offense, unless he develops into a good shooter, putting him as a small ball 5 wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. No, I don't advocate towards not having Christian Wood on the floor for long stretches. I want to see them get a little kooky with that lineup.
Yeah. Okay. So if I were to go all youth, and this goes against everything, I want to build the best lineup I can possibly be. I think this lineup's going to be terrible, but let me just say, let me just say what I think it could be. Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen Green, Josh Christopher. I think at small forward. I'm going to put Tate to the side. I'm going to start Kenyon Martin Jr. I'm going to go even crazier. Okay, and I'm going to start Sengun. I love Sengun, man. I can't quit him. I want to see him in the NBA so badly, but probably more than I want to see Jalen Green because I want to be right about him.
I do hope they try it can be any. I don't care which players it is, even if they don't fit. Let's run the all youth lineup. Like this is yours feels like it could be semi-realistic when you're thinking about the personnel, especially if you think Kenyon Martin Jr. is going to get some of the backup 4 minutes anyway. What would be really stopping you from? And Kevin Porter Jr. is already basically your point guard. What's stopping you from trying that lineup?
Nothing. And you're putting a bunch of athletes next to Sengun, which I like. I like the idea of long term just surrounding Sengun with a bunch of versatile athletes, aside from Kenyon Martin Jr. Like I think that's fun. Like that's fun to think about.
So as of this recording, because I know these things are subject to change, their over under is set at 27.5 for next season.
Under.
Taking the under.
I want to put money on that right now. After we're done recording this podcast, I'm taking the under on that.
Wow. So you're that. I guess the West is tough. So where do you envision?
They won 17 games last year. They won 17 games. Like this was a really bad team last year. And they added 6 rookies. I mean, they added 4 rookies. They're going to be really bad. Like, and I get that a lot of these rookies are talented. So theoretically, like they're adding talent to the roster. I get it. But young players turn the ball over a lot. They suck at defense, and they're not very efficient. So like all those 3, like it's not great. I think they're going to be better than they were last year just because they're going to have better health. I think they're going to make more sense because John Wall's not there. But I think they're still going to be like, if I were to peg it, I'd probably say 25, 24 wins. That's probably where I have it.
I think I'm with you now that I'm thinking about this. It doesn't feel like, and they've had time to do this because I only looked this up before we recorded this podcast, that they haven't accounted for the fact that John Wall isn't going to be with this team. And I know he wouldn't have made them marginally better, but he's the best point guard you have on the roster. And if they do decide to trade Eric Gordon, so I'm going to take the under here too. And there's also, when you look at the West, as I already mentioned, most of the teams there, even if you don't believe in them as actual play-in candidates, Minnesota, even Sacramento as of right now, unless they blow it, like those squads are trying to win. OKC and Houston are kind of the only teams that are not, unless I'm missing one there. I'm trying to think of what other team in the West is not actively trying to win. And so that kind of benefits Houston. And I think what also benefits them is even if they are more talented, because of the rookies they brought in, should you commit yourself to playing all 4, which you've questioned whether they actually will, you are probably just organically going to be worse by virtue of that added youth.
Yeah, and listen, like I actually do think they have a lot of good role players. The problem is who's stirring the drink. Right, like a lot of young talent, and I don't think there's I think Kevin Porter Jr. is going to surprise some people. I think he'll actually have a decent season next year, but I don't think he's good enough to carry this team to the play-in tournament. Like I just don't like that's too ambitious for his first year as a starting player in the NBA.
Yeah, and look, if you look at even the teams that, let's say, they're caught between trying to win and not caring about it. San Antonio, Sacramento, Minnesota, Memphis, given what they did this offseason, they're all still they should be clearly better than both Houston and Oklahoma City.
Yeah, and what's interesting is they also haven't torn the roster down to shreds yet. Like they still have a crap ton of vets, and I think they're going to be trading some of these vets mid-season. Like we talked about already, they're going to trade Eric Gordon. They might trade Daniel House. They might trade like some of the free they signed this summer. Like I think they're when you trade those vets, you're going to get worse too.
And if you do end up trading Christian Wood because there's an offer at the trade deadline that blows you away, that you need to slam the under. If you don't think Christian Wood is going to finish the season on the Rockets, you need to slam the under on the 27.5. Yeah. Where do you think they are in the West? Bottom 2, bottom 3?
The only team that I could see as worse than them is Oklahoma City. I think Oklahoma City is god awful. They're really bad.
If Oklahoma City is even within sniffing distance of 500 10 games into the season, they're shutting Shai Gilgeous-Alexander down for the next half decade and trading literally everybody else on the roster around him. They are so clearly not interested in winning any basketball games right now.
Yeah, and if they are that, they should give that guy, what's his name, Mark Dano. How do you pronounce his name? Yeah, they gotta throw like they have to throw a bunch of money at him to retain him for like a 10-year extension.
Well, they need to fire him because he's ruining the tank.
Yeah. Because like their roster is just so. Well, here's the thing: Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I don't want to be disrespectful. He's really, really good, but everybody else is so bad, and they're so young. And they also took a bunch of rookies in this draft. I think people forget like they had a ton of draft picks in this draft, and they're going to be leaning on a lot of those rookies. They're going to be leaning on a lot of Poku. I'm not sure. I feel confident in that roster. I think that's going to be a really bad team.
Oh, it's built to be. And this is not an Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Let's just leave it at that. Their roster is wolf. And I question a lot of their draft. So Josh Giddey, I didn't you look at this, and their second best player is very clearly going to be Lou Dort, which I think is a problem if he's your second best player. Their biggest issue is where they're ahead of the curve because they have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but where Houston has a tentpole prospect, they still, to me, don't have a tentpole prospect. Like, they're trying to build around Shai. Josh Giddey doesn't want to score. It doesn't look like when you watch him play. And it's not Lou Dort. It's not, Jeremiah Robinson Earl. I couldn't believe they traded numbers 32 and 34 whatever they did for him, just to trade up to get him. Just bizarre. But the question I want to
ask, just felt like their whole draft just felt like franchise hubris. Like they curved at every possible direction. Like, okay, so they're gonna take, what was it? Who was available at number 6? Was Kuminga available?
Yeah, he was. He went at number 7 in the
So they passed on Kuminga. They passed on Sengun, who was supposed to be like a top 10 pick on a lot of people's boards, and then they traded him to Houston for 2 first-round picks.
That aren't going to convey for, like, I would argue the first time one of those picks is going to convey. I think your best bet is probably, I don't even know. I'm looking at the protections right now, and it's because Washington in 2023, I don't think Bradley Beal is still there, personally. I guess Detroit might be the first of these picks might not convey to 2024 is my point, if that.
Yeah. It's going to be a while. It's draft hubris. That's what that is. But to be fair, we only got to see, what was it, 3 minutes of Josh Giddey in the summer league. He had a nice dunk.
And that was the other thing, is he scored, which was just so out of character for him. So maybe we're all just completely wrong.
Yeah. Maybe he's the hidden gem that, but here's the thing. He was in an exposed league. It's not like Giannis playing over in Greece where nobody got to see him. Like, he was in a pretty well-documented league. It's not like people weren't watching Josh Giddey. It was just such a curveball to me. I would have taken Kuminga, but we'll see. We'll see what he is.
With regard to the Rockets, is there anything about them that we didn't touch upon? I didn't ask you that you think really needs to be talked about before we wrap up?
No, I think we covered everything. To me, the most compelling storyline, and I'm not sure if I made it clear enough, I really want to see Kevin Porter Jr., man. Because they're clearly putting the keys of that position to, they're giving him the keys. And we'll see if that's a smart decision. He was really intriguing, and they got him for absolutely nothing. So I guess it can't hurt to just see what he has. And if he doesn't work out, you can trade him. You can waive him, whatever. But it is one of those things where it surprised me. It really did surprise me that the John Wall thing unfolded as quickly as it did.
And look, the offense when he was at point guard was not good. It was in the 26th percentile of efficiency, 108.4 offensive rating per cleaning the glass. That's still better than what their overall offensive rating was. And so if you're not going to play John Wall, he's clearly your best next highest swing there to run, unless you're going to acquire someone else, because it's not DJ Augustine, it's not Dante Exum and his little net rating contract incentive, and I don't even know who you could realistically think about pivoting to after that. Is it?
What are they going to put in their next contract? Is it going to be like Vorp? Are they going to put Vorp in their next contract? It's just such an insane stat to put into a contract negotiation. It's nuts.
I will say that I thought it was wild. People's reaction was, well, why would the agent negotiate a team dependent incentive like that? And I was like, it is kind of done all the time, because if you make it to the X round of the playoffs or win a title, that's not on the shoulders of player Y anyway. So, but yes, I need them to get even more specific, where it's if they finish in the top 7 of steal percentage and top 10 of block percentage in the same, let's get super just granular, whatever. But I think that's my favorite, maybe not my favorite, but it's clearly the best contract incentive to come out of the offseason.
Yeah, what are we going to use next? John Hollinger's board metric? How deep are we going to get with this? It's just,
we need to, if your average ranking in all the top 15 catch-all metrics is in the top 50 or that, it should be something like that. Incorporate all these metrics, average out your rank, and that should be the next incentive. Salman Ali covers the Houston Rockets and the NBA at large for Clutch Points. He's also the host of the Red Nation Hoops podcast. Are you able to tell our listeners where they can find you and your work, Salman?
Yeah, for the podcast, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, all those top platforms, I'm there. ClutchPoints.com, you'll find my work there under the Rockets section. And you can follow me on Twitter at Salman Ali NBA. I'm going to tweet all my work, obviously.
Definitely follow him on Twitter. He will sometimes publish polls that Rockets fans are overwhelmingly against, and those are just fun to respond to.
Yeah, I like pissing off the fan base that I cover. It's always fun.
Thank you so much for doing this, Salman. It was a blast as always, and I think you know by now I'll be pestering you again in the future.
I'm looking forward to it.
I'm Andre Knott, and on my new podcast, Brownstown, I'm chronicling the sometimes sad but always hilarious story of the last 20 years of Cleveland Browns dysfunction. With the voices of Jim Donovan, Brady Quinn, Tim Couch, Romeo Crennel, Josh Cribbs, TJ Ward, Phil Savage, and many more, we'll track how unbelievably bad decisions and bad luck kept this team down for way too long. So join us as we go tailgating in the Muni Lot and diving deep into the dog pound. You're going to Brownstown.